We had, I think, 30 or so people register, a mix of teachers and parents. It's going, well, it is recorded, so many people will register knowing that they can't make it, but they want to get the recording, which is great. We're happy for that. So if you are watching this recording and you're not here in real time and you're now, I guess we would be in the past, you're in the future or something like that, welcome. But for everyone that's with us tonight, I am grateful. And I know we have brand new teachers joining us, and we've got veteran teachers with us. So since we're a small group, before we even get started, I just thought I'd let everyone kind of say good evening. And I know we've had one instructor meeting back in April, but we were, gosh, at that point, I think 40 to 50 teachers that came to that meeting. So I know we did not go around the room and introduce ourselves. So I guess I'm trying to think with my students, I usually come up with something to say, like, tell us your name and your favorite color. I don't know. So, but I just don't have that off the top of my head right now. So let's just introduce ourselves and say hello. So Monica, can I pick on you just because I don't know. I looked at you first.
Sure.
You want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. I do icebreakers a lot with kids. I think the last one we did, the last one we did wasn't so super great, but it was, what was your favorite type of chip, which was interesting because, especially being, from all over, you have very unique chips throughout the country and the world. So my name is Monica. I'm a new teacher in the Aquinas house and starting working in the tutoring center also. I'm living in Louisiana. And my favorite chips are blue corn tortilla chips. Which is, I guess you can find those everywhere. So not specific, but we're a military family, so I guess that makes sense. I had to pick something that I could find everywhere.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's see, Allison Johansson. I know we've got two Allisons tonight.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Johansson. I know I love Allison Haley because we spell our name the same. But I'm in Northern Virginia. I'm here with my husband and my two children who also go to Scaleo Academy, and we love it. And going off of what Monica said, I love potato chips, but I cannot even eat one because it raises my blood pressure and I can't stick with one. So sometimes I'll nibble one from my sons, but I love potato chips, but I can't eat them. So that's my, I would say one of my favorite food strengths is coffee for sure though. So, hi.
Well, welcome. And I know we've got a couple people that are coming in. I think there's another instructor and a parent. So we're just introducing ourselves. And the question of the night is, what is your favorite chip? So Vincent, I'm going to pass it to you.
All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Vincent Capone. This is my first year. I'll be instructing with Scaleo Academy, teaching pre-algebra. One of 4 segments we have of pre-algebra. I'm boring with my chips. I'm just a plain old potato chip guy. Another icebreaker that I do with my students I started doing several years ago was I call it the 24-hour game. And I ask my students, if you had 24 hours, you could go anywhere and do anything on this planet. Supersonic jet, you could be on 2 sides of the earth in the same day. What would you do? Where would you go? So one place I definitely want to go on my bucket list is Ireland, and also to see C.S. Lewis's The Kilns. So those are my 2 things. Right now I'm in Hamilton, New Jersey, so nothing too exotic about central New Jersey. It's pretty. I don't have to worry about urban sprawl here, but a lot of things I would like to eventually see, though.
Well, welcome. Let's see, Milika, how are you this evening?
Hi, I'm Milica. Actually, it's like pizza, not the sea. I always tell people that. Sorry, my video isn't cooperating for some reason, but
it's okay. Militsa.
Yes.
Did I say it right? Okay.
Yes, yes. My last name is Savic. Actually, I just officially changed it like last Sunday. I'm living in Belgrade, Serbia. So right now here it's about 1 a.m. My favorite chip is probably sour cream and onion. Yes, and I'll also be teaching for St. Raphael School. It'll be my first year.
And congratulations. I know you're a newlywed.
Yes, and I'm also expecting. And so
congratulations.
Yeah.
So many happy things going on.
Yeah, a lot of stuff is happening all at once. So, but it's good.
Well, you're a trooper to join us 1 a.m. your time. Dr. Seward, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, sorry, I'm traveling in the car, so I'm probably just gonna listen up tonight.
Well, that's great. Do you want to tell us what you're teaching, just so we can kind of, I'm just having everyone introduce themselves.
Sure, yeah. I'll be teaching the high school, upper school, Western civilization, and a British literature class.
Well, very good. Welcome. Anise.
I am, my name is Denise Hoffman. I'm going to be teaching Spanish 1 and Spanish A and Spanish B and Spanish conversations. And I don't know what the heck I was thinking doing all this. That's crazy. I just realized in the last few weeks that it was crazy, but that's okay. The other crazy thing I'm going to be doing while eating Cheetos in my 24-hour adventure, Cheetos, because then they will make my mouth and my fingers so deliciously orange and I can just, okay. So while I'm eating those Cheetos, I'm going to be flying to, I've been thinking these last couple of weeks that I would like to take the Camino to Santiago de Compostela. It's in Spain, and so like hike for hours. So I'll just have to start at the last stop right before you get there because I only 24 hours. So then I will just like be eating Cheetos and like walking the rest of the Camino and then spend the rest of the day there. So that's what I will do.
That's fabulous. I don't think I have the energy to keep up with you, but send postcards. Kara, do you want to introduce yourself?
So hi, I'm Kara Lobley. I teach Writing and Rhetoric 1 and 2 and Welder Language 2. This is my 3rd year with School Academy. And I'm actually from farther south than the southern Indiana there, in Alabama. So it is rather hot and wet currently. So in the 24-hour adventure, I'd probably like to see some of the places around the United States, like the Statue of Liberty or the Liberty Bell, because I've not had the chance to see them yet, or the Grand Canyon or Mount Rushmore, things like that. My degree was in history, and I'd like to sneak a bunch of history into Writing and Rhetoric and help the children see the context of the story. So.
That's great. Good to see you tonight. Nathan.
So my name is Nathan. Excuse me. I am teaching for the Canterbury House of Studies, a couple of the middle school and an upper school course, mostly Bible. I'm very excited about that. I'm also in the Writing and Rhetoric docket, so I'm hyped about that too. My favorite color is probably a forest green. I feel like if I had an opportunity to travel the world, I wouldn't linger in one place for very long. Like I'd want to soak it all up as much as I could. So I would almost like if I had a personal jet, I'd stay 45 seconds at the Great Wall of China, just long enough to get a picture, you know, and then 45 seconds in Thailand and then 45 seconds in Paris, you know, like just as quickly as I possibly could, encompassing like everything I could until my time was up. So just hit all the highlights, you know?
That makes me think of, I don't know, those of you with young kids or had young kids in the past. Do you guys remember the Einstein videos? They would fly around in their jet with the music and they travel. Anyways, Nathan, that's what I was thinking of. You would enjoy the little Einstein excursion around the world. Let's see, Ash.
Sorry, I'm on my phone. I'm not used to doing this on my phone. Hello, everybody. This is my 4th year with School A. I teach Writing and Rhetoric 3, a new section of Writing Rhetoric 4, new to me this year, and then Informal Logic, the Art of Argument. And I'm going to go back to the chip thing. I think my favorite really does have to be salt and vinegar. But after a while, they really rip your mouth up. So then I would say I have discovered dill pickle flavored chips, which aren't just everywhere, but they've got that tart vinegarariness, but they're kind of more gentle on my face. So yeah, and I live in the Shenandoah Valley, Virginia, although my husband and I are insane and are this next month literally moving up to his hometown of Butler, Pennsylvania, to be with family because of some health concerns and stuff like that. So it's going to be a big month. That and learning Canvas. Look.
You picked a really good time to do that move. Oh my, well, prayers for you for sure. Amy.
Hi, I'm teaching Writing and Rhetoric 3 and 5 after having taught 4 and 5 for a couple of years. And I'm the Writing and Rhetoric department chair, so I've gotten to play with several of you in person a few times. My favorite chip is like a nostalgic one because when I was in 6th grade and we carpooled to school, we would stop at the gas station with me and my dad and we'd get Funyuns and Dr. Pepper. So Funyuns is my nostalgic favorite chip. But I don't buy it for the family. I just buy it when I'm grocery shopping by myself. And then I splurge in my Funyun thing. And I can't say like where I would go on a Sonic Jet in 24 hours, but because I would go anywhere that someone pays for it. Like just take me wherever you want to. I want to go there. But my son is going to college this year in 3 weeks. And so he and I decided that given that we have 4 days after dad and sister start school at the very 1st of August, we are going to dash down to Birmingham and see some relatives that we haven't seen for 3 years. And so we're going to make a quick like drive one day, stay 2 days, drive back one day kind of visit. So that's where we decided to have a last hurrah of summer the 2nd week of August. And I'm looking forward to those hours of captivity that my son will have in the car with me before I have to let him go.
Oh, that is hard. My oldest is only 6, and so I have a hard time when he just goes to day camp. So I can't even imagine.
Well, there are some ways that we're really looking forward to it, and like reminders that I have to give him all the time. I'm really thankful that I won't have to do that, and our relationship will not be about that anymore, but it can be about other things.
All right, I know we've got let's see, a parent, I believe, with us. Julie, would you like to introduce yourself? Is it Lowry? Lowry? Julie, I don't know if you can hear us or if you're having trouble unmuting.
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. I did this book last year also with the chapter that you did last year. So I just really, really appreciated it. Loved this year's too. So I have a lot of allergies. So my favorite chip is the only chip I can eat, which are tortilla chips. And I don't know if we could do anything in 24 hours. What would we do? Where would we go? Yeah, probably to New Mexico. That's right. I spent some time on a horse ranch in New Mexico. And I really enjoyed that. So probably that.
I can see you in the beautiful sunshine. You've got quite a brood around you. Did you want to let us know the ages of your kids or kind of where they fall in classes? Are you with Scole Academy or Scole Academy in the Houses of Studies?
Yes, we are a part of the St. Raphael School. Yes, everyone is very excited to see Presbyterian Maria on there. And Martha, she's our oldest. She is 10, and she just moved up to the next level of courses, and I can't remember what the name is of it. I think one of your teachers is here though. But she's doing where you read the book and you do the things with it. Oh, what was it called? I forgot what it's called, but yeah, literature, that's the one. And then the boys also do the literature class with Dr. Mullen.
That's great. Well, welcome. We're so glad that you've kind of enjoyed the book discussion last year and that you've come back for this one this year. So welcome. Andy, thanks for joining us. Did you want to just introduce yourself? We were kind of having fun with a couple icebreakers, your favorite chip, or where you'd go if you had a super fast jet, 24 hours. Oh, you're muted still.
Oh, I was just having trouble with my volume. It was so loud that but where would I go if I had a super fast jet? Someplace cooler, I think, since we've been about 107, 104, maybe Alaska, maybe. That'd be good. That'd be good. I think so. But it's good to be here. Good to see you, Joanne, and everyone else.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Would you also remind everybody what you're teaching for this coming term?
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm teaching 8 courses, as if I've counted them right. 2 sections of informal logic, formal logic, the rhetoric class for the senior thesis. All these I'm looking forward to. And then I have 2 sections of the ancient literature and 2 sections of the ancient history that correspond with it. So a full slate. Really, and this is my first year with Scole, so I'm really looking forward to September coming up. So, yeah, it's really good, and it's nice not to be starting in August. I'm used to that, so it's nice to be September. I can still prep. So that's, I think, about it. Anything else sorry, I'm running late, Joanne.
Oh no, you're totally fine. We are just kind of easing our way into this discussion, and we're about to start. So no apologies needed at all. You are not late. You are okay. Right in the mix. Allison, Haley, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am from Southeast Ohio, and my favorite chip would be probably kettle chips, the extra crunchy kind, probably barbecue kettle chips. And I think I'd go with Amy I would get on a jet and go anywhere, especially if it was with a friend, and especially if the friend had local insight. So I really like to travel with someone that kind of knows the ropes, and then I don't have to be stressed out about it. And especially if we were going somewhere in Europe, because I've never been and it's on my bucket list. So I am teaching math in this year, Algebra 2 and Trig. This will be my 2nd year at that level.
And Allison is also, as you know, helping our instructors with Canvas. And she's amazing with answering questions, knowing what to do. She's great with technology and culture and events. So you will hear from her again throughout the year. Presbytera, your favorite chips and where you'd go.
Oh, well, I would gather all the good people who went to join me because, it's a fast jet. So, that means that probably you can fit as many people as you want on it. And we would serve dill chips because, Ash, that is my favorite, is dill chips. That is my favorite. And wherever they wanted to go, we would just go in order and everyone gets to pick a spot. And I would just sit back, enjoy everybody's choices, and have my bag of chips.
Oh. Very good. I would go with Allison Haley's choice, kettle chips, but just the plain ones. That's what I love. That's kind of like my comfort food. I'm not teaching this year. This is my first year since 2016 that I won't be teaching, but of course, directing the school program, including the Houses of Studies, and acting as principal of School A Academy. So I'm really excited to continue in that role and to support new teachers, returning teachers, and quite a bit of growth across the school community. So it's really exciting. And I enjoy nights like this where it's informal and we get to have some time to kind of connect with each other more in this way than just kind of business as usual. And then if I could go anywhere, I would agree with Vincent. I would go to Ireland. I've never been there and I've wanted to since I've been little. It's just one of the places I've never been to. So maybe someday, we'll see. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into our discussion. I thought, since this is the last section of the book, The Four Cardinal Virtues by Joseph Pieper, we would kind of recap. Some of us have been with the group reading from the very beginning when we started with Prudence. And then I know some of us kind of came in somewhere in the middle, and then some of us are just joining us with Temperance. So let me share this slide. And give me one moment. Okay, can you guys give me a thumbs up if you see recap? Okay, perfect. It worked. Yay. Okay, so here we are. Whoops, there we go. So I thought maybe we would just look at a couple slides before we get into the new content, but as a recap here, Prudence, Joseph Pieper says, the prudent man does not expect certainty where it cannot exist, nor on the other hand does he deceive himself by false certainties. And then the bullets are just some kind of key ideas and concepts from the text and things that were highlighted in our discussion back in 2019, I believe was the first year that we discussed this. So I pulled some of these, hopefully jogging our memory. And again, if you haven't had a chance to read from the start of the book, this will give you some context. But that first one there talking about resolute shaping power of our minds, which transforms knowledge of reality into realization of the good. And when I think of maybe how this played out in the classroom, in my years of teaching, I was mostly in writing and rhetoric, but also had an opportunity to teach humanities, literature, and history in the middle school, specifically the medieval Renaissance and Reformation. And discussion around the good, but specifically recognizing the good, comes out quite a bit in writing. I think of even just the rubrics that we use in our classroom. I always think that's not just a grading tool for teachers, but it's a roadmap for the kids. And of course, when we're seeking to train them, form them in recognizing the good, the question then is, well, what is the good when it comes to a well-written essay? Or what is the good in this particular discussion, whether it's in history class or literature? But I think when I recalled this idea of prudence and how we hopefully are modeling this or instilling this in our students, modeling this for our students in our classroom, that's what came to my mind, is just thinking about assessment and rubrics and how that helps our students acknowledge the good, realize the good, and then act according to what is the good. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And of course, I just want to say again, right now we're doing the recap, but once we get into discussion, I think we're going to be pulling into our discussion on temperance, prudence, and justice and fortitude as well. So I'm sure as we go through each slide, many of you are already kind of thinking of either moments in your homeschool, moments in your classroom, or just moments in your own study and day-to-day practice. Presbytera, would you like to talk about justice?
Thank you. So Pieper talks about justice, and it's interesting because when you read several pieces, whether you're reading this one, the Four Cardinal Virtues, or Virtues of the Human Heart, he mentions and talks about justice being the virtue of the we. And he splits it up into different things, which is, how we interact with each other as a community, how the social whole society reacts to individual members, and the relationship between the individual members like us to the society. And, I was thinking about how this plays out in education. And so here, the definitions listed here is: to be just means then to owe something and to pay the debt. Consists living one with another. Piety is annexed to justice and the place of justice in communal life. And so the sense of justice doesn't sit just at a surface level. And Thomas Aquinas also said, justice, legal justice is important, but it's just not enough. It has to come down to this we, the virtue of the we, that we all have to be virtuous as individuals and collectively as a group, and be accountable for one another, that we are the engagement with other people. And so in years past, I had one case that really struck me when Joanne and I talked about tonight. I said, I would really like to do justice. So in one of my courses, I asked students we had a symposium of a book, and each student was assigned one chapter of the book, and they were to come and nothing written, just prepare a simple 3-minute speech, right, on the book, a synopsis, kind of like what I'm doing now, right? And so one of my students started talking, and boy, did it sound familiar. Verbatim. And I just sat back and I let it play out, and he presented and it played out, and he read his chapter, different parts verbatim. And once the symposium was done, I contacted him, we discussed, we contacted the families, and we said, okay, so how is this just, right? The other students read the chapters, developed their own 3-minute synopsis, presented it with a visual, and yet this young man, probably because he ran out of time, most likely, right? And he said, okay, what am I going to do? All my classmates are having this, and I've already asked for extension. What am I going to do? And he just read from the book, right? So what is just? Is it just to be totally punitive? Is it just to for him to fail? Is it just for him to be shamed? No, none of these things are just. And actually, Pieper says that education is ethical. Again, it comes down to the just, forming the youth into leadership to be just people, right, in society. So the one always synergistically works on the other. The end of the story is that he actually came to his own terms and presented again because he wanted to, and actually apologized to his classmates that he was unprepared, and now he was, and he'll do his presentation. And I did not take off any points, right? Because ultimately, not only did he learn as an individual, but also we learned communally what that justice means. And I know when we get into temperance, when Joanne starts talking about temperance, humility is part of that, right? Purity is part of that. And this was part of the growing up process to make just humans in the world. So justice is the virtue of the we.
That's great, Presbyteria. As you were giving us that example, I just happened upon the passage about the act of justice, which orders the association of individuals with one another, is restitutio, recompense, restoration. And so obviously the actions of that student restored, right, the injustice that was done within that community, within that classroom. Thank you. So I'd like to maybe put someone on the spot here when we go to this next slide. If you've been following our instructor blog, we've had several instructors write blogs this year on fortitude. Fortitude was the virtue of the 21-22 academic year. And I know some of these instructors are here tonight. Through our instructor blog, we've talked about fortitude in the classroom, in the lower school, in literature, in writing. So if one of our instructors here tonight is struck perhaps by the Holy Spirit, or just inspired to read this slide and maybe reference an experience that they had in their classroom that you'd like to share, we would be most grateful.
So when we say the fortitude, did you want us to just read the slide, just read it, or?
Yeah, so if you want to read the slide and then maybe speak to your specific class or experience similar to what Presbyteria did and what I did.
Okay. So part of the definitions for fortitude people were talking about was the highest form of fortitude is martyrdom. It was the readiness to die, to fall in battle. And it presupposed vulnerability. Without vulnerability, there is no possibility of fortitude. Because if you couldn't get hurt, then of course you would go out and put yourself in a dangerous situation because you knew you wouldn't get hurt and there was no courage there. And one way that some of the students showed fortitude was in the writing rhetoric classes when they had to prepare a speech and give it. In writing rhetoric 2, they gave it on medieval horses. On writing rhetoric 1, they gave it on spiders. And some of the children were a little afraid of spiders, but they researched them anyway and faced their fear and showed us a little picture of spiders. I'm like, you don't have to give us a real picture. You could draw one. That works too. And they did. And they were able to make it through the class on the thing that was a little scary for them.
That's great. Thank you, Kara. Amy Morgan, did you want to share something? I saw you unmute your.
Oh, that's okay. I was just thinking about some of the, as you said about prudence, it's easy. The materials that we have give opportunities to highlight that. And so I think that in some of our classes, well, in Writing and Rhetoric 4 in particular, we have examples of people who demonstrated fortitude. They were ready to face hardship for good. And Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass are a couple of examples that we talk about in Writing and Rhetoric 4 and the students get a chance to write about. So I appreciate those models of courage. And also, we also get a chance to talk about what fortitude isn't, because we also see some very bold people like John Wilkes Booth who do a quote unquote brave or risk-taking action for the sake of something that he believed in. But what was the difference between his, action of killing the president versus the actions of other people. And so talking about like how, well, in fact, it's kind of a matter of intemperance, because that led him to that he didn't have rightly ordered passions in the first place. And so because he didn't have a right view of the good and the just, his action, which might seem brave, his risk taking is really not an example of true courage or fortitude. So we're able to contrast some of those characters, and that's a really rich discussion that takes place.
Yeah, absolutely. As we kind of pull this together, pull prudence and justice and fortitude together, it's kind of a good transition. I pulled this quote from, it's page 147 in the section on temperance, but prudence looks to all existent reality, justice to the fellow man. The man of fortitude relinquishes in self-forgetfulness his own possessions and his life. Temperance, on the other hand, aims at each man himself. Temperance looks to himself and his condition, his vision, his will. For me, reading through the section on temperance, of course, I kind of bring everything into the understanding that it's about man's inner order. And so as I was reading through it, I'm thinking a lot about when you talk about, Amy, what is temperance or what is not temperance? It's kind of that order versus chaos. We certainly see that in culture and society, but then we can also see why then man himself, there is that struggle, that internal struggle between order and chaos. Serenity of spirit. There's, if you all have, I know we have different translations of scripture. I'll just grab my Bible. This, of course, is one of the scripture verses that Joseph Pieper references in terms of harmony of the body, or order. I believe he was referencing, it might have been one King James, but I don't have the King James Bible in front of me, but I will read this passage. It's a brief, a short one, but it speaks again to this order and our understanding of temperance. So starting with verse, well, I'll start just a little bit before verse 24. So verse 23, for I received from the Lord what I also handed on to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night he was handed over, oh, pardon me, am I on the right one? Yes. That the Lord Jesus, on the night he was handed over, took bread, and after he'd given thanks, broke it and said, this is my body that is for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Hold on 1 second. I think I might have my reference wrong because that's not matching. Let me go back to the text. Let's see here. Let me look it up this way.
I have my Bible right here. I think I see what you're looking for.
Did you find it? Do you want to read it for us? Thanks, Monica.
Sure. So I think this sounds right. On the contrary, the parts of the body which seem to be weaker are indispensable, and those parts of the body which we think less honorable, we invest with the greater honor, and our unpresentable parts are treated with greater modesty, which our more presentable parts do not require. But God has so composed the body, giving the greater honor to the inferior part, that there may be no discord in the body, but that the members may have the same care for one another. If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together.
Thank you. Yeah, so I believe the Latin that the text references is Deus temperavit corpus. And again, it's the idea there of the unity, the harmony, the order, and intemperance being just the opposite of that. And I was thinking the slide before, just the questions of, you know, how timely this is for right now. I mean, we've been living in a time when society is very fragmented. And certainly we've seen that on the news, but even just recently in our school community, when we sent out another update for the handbook, we were talking about just how we understand the human person, and what's going on in terms of how humanity, men, women, our students, boys and girls, are uncertain about their identity, right? We're given a lot of mixed messages, and there is that breakdown of our understanding of the human person, separating even the human person in the sense of the body and soul, not seeing that unity. Let me move to the next slide. So modes of temperance, and I know for our conversation tonight, we could spend a lot of time just on one of these, but I thought it would be good to try to kind of summarize as best we could on a screen what temperance is. And you know, Joseph Pieper, he goes into detail on all of these: chastity, continence, humility, gentleness, mildness, studiositas, and then what temperance is not. Intemperance, right? Unchastity, incontinence, pride, uninhibited wrath. That's always an interesting one. Anger. It's hard sometimes. Christians aren't sure what to do with anger, but that is an emotion. It is good, and there is a place for anger, but this is something different. And then curiositas, which has more to do with kind of greed. So what I'd like to do is, we're small enough that I think we'll just stay in this main group tonight instead of breaking off into two. And so I'm going to put in the chat box the questions so that everyone can kind of open them up on their own screen. So give me one moment and I will drop that in there. Okay, so that link should allow you to open up a document, and we're not bound to just those questions. In fact, if you already have a passage or a question that's just really standing out, I would rather you go with what's pressing on your heart than go with what's posed here. But the two questions that I thought perhaps could start off conversation, and then there's additional questions and passages we can go to. But Pieper writes, in the province of Temperantia, as we have said before, it is man's attitude toward creation which is decided and most incisively. How does this inform our understanding of reality? And then another possible question we could explore has to do with language. Due to a poverty of language as modern people, how do we model and teach temperance to our students in the classroom and home, starting youngest to the oldest? So I'm gonna stop sharing just so we can see everybody. You all have the link to this document and you can look at this question, or certainly open up with a question or a passage that resonates with you.
I'll say that just to go back to the scripture that you pointed out, I think that really hits on why to see the fragments of the interpretations of masculinity and femininity in our culture, why that hurts us. Because there's, you could very easily say, well, if we're not bothering you, then why does it matter to you? But that scripture passage really highlights how, if you really believe that we're all created by the same God, in the image and likeness of God, then it would hurt any member of the body to see a distortion or an intemperance of understanding of the human body.
I like that you said that, Monica, because it brings to light for me on temperance is the purification he talks about. It's the gateway to understand, and I see on page 205, if you're following, he says, if one approaches the difficult concept of purity through the strangely neglected gateway and begins to understand purity as the fruit of purification, the confusing and disordered sounds which usually obscure this notion and move it dangerously are silenced, right? So the sense of temperance is liberating to us and purifying us from these things that kind of distort, like what you say. And, in the Greek, we would say amartia, missing the mark, that distorts that. And I think that's really interesting.
I'm a little confused by that perspective, Presbyterian Maria. Maybe it's just me, but being like purified to me sounds like sanctification, about how God is making us more in like his image. Mm-hmm. And you would think as that happens, we show more of the fruits of the Spirit. As we follow him in his example. Is this similar on the same idea, or is this something completely different?
Oh, I am unmuted. I was like, let me unmute. He goes on to say, and the answer to your question is yes, right? So it's the readiness to accept that our journey with God, again, I'll go back to the Greek, the oneness, the theosis, coming closer to the image, like what you said, is an intervention. And it's not something wrong. It's not something terrible, right? It's something that we need to do to uproot that which is there that needs to be uprooted. And I like what Joanne said, which was, all of this ties together. So even with this little part, we go back to the story of the young man in Justice, right? And so he did show this. He did show that he was able to have temperance and to be liberated from, let's say, his intemperance of digging his heels in. I don't know if I answered your question or if someone else can, elaborate. Kara?
Partially, it sounds like it is a form of sanctification is what I'm drawing from.
Ultimately, we're created to be saints, every single one of us. That's why we were created. Miracles, right? And God created good. So if God created good and we're miracles, then ultimately we're all supposed to get to paradise, which makes us saints. S with a small s, right? Not a capital S.
Right.
So a capital S would be us being lifted up by God as an example to others publicly, right? So yes, on both accounts, it is the one and it is the other. And it kind of merges.
Presbytera, what you're saying is kind of sparking something with me that connects to the first of the discussion questions about, from that quote, that the province of Temperantia, it is man's attitude toward creation. And then the question being, how does this inform our understanding of reality? I worked at a school with a wonderful academic dean who, I may have used this example before, but he would always talk about us, and I guess we can say this is what happens during sanctification, through discipleship, is coming closer and closer in line with the plumb line of God's reality. And I think about how in Dante's Divine Comedy, in the very last stanza of the entire giant, 3-part poem, he says he is in heaven. He is looking at the heavenly spheres, and he's looking at God, who is represented in this very mathematical, perfect, amazing rose, like a flowering rose in the sky, but represented within all these like circles of stars. And he says something along the lines of like, and finally I stopped talking because my will and my desire, which are two things that he would talk about throughout the entirety. I may have gotten muted. That he would talk about through the entirety of the poem. My will and my desire were in line with the love, capital L, who directs the stars and the fears. That at last, this idea of all of our parts being in harmony, not too much or too little of any of the things. I'm at last in line with that plumb line. Both my will and my desire are in line with his, AKA, what is reality? And that all of our issues in society today, or at any time, it's trying to break through our human brokenness, our subjectivity, our inability to really get the right news about everything, to how can I get closer to understanding the reality of a situation, whether it is the reality of God's reality when we talk about gender, or our relationship with food, money, etc. So just a lot of things kind of sparking with that one for me.
Yeah, there are really two things that kind of going on with Karen Ash had said, and Presbyter Maria also. Two quotes that I had underlined. One was at the bottom of 163, and another towards the top of 167. The one at the bottom of 163 was real perfected virtue, by the very nature of its concept, bears the joyous radiant seal of ease, of effortlessness, of self-evident inclination. And again, that's a process. It's not going to be, that's not going to happen overnight, but it's that sanctification process, that gradual change. And then I also loved on 167, the top of the page there, at the end of the paragraph, it says, "It has been said that only the pure of heart can laugh freely and liberatingly. It is no less true that only those who look at the world with pure eyes can experience its beauty." So that I really appreciate that one, showing the change that we undergo, the sanctification process. It's not just, I don't know how to say it. I think as Christians, it can be easy to kind of get caught up in the sense of thinking just the eternal benefits of sanctification and the the long game. But in the shorter game, in a sense, we see that where laughter becomes freer and more real. Experiencing and seeing beauty becomes more real. And so it's not just God telling us sanctification process, this is going to be something on down the line, you're not going to see any benefits of it. No, we're going to see this in our lives here. Obviously not perfected, but we're not going to be left with nothing either.
Whoa. And not only that, right, individually and collectively, right? We think of the cross of Christ, the vertical axis being our relationship with God, this theosis of sanctification, but it can't be alone. It has to also be with the horizontal axis of the cross, which is our relationship with one another. And together, that's where the journey of sanctification moves in the correct direction. Whoa.
Something else in relation to what everyone's saying that helps me understand what Joseph Pieper means when he talks about this purity. He also references sobriety. It's in the middle of page 205, or maybe 2/3 to the bottom. It is said in the scriptures, grave illness sobers the soul. This sobriety belongs to the essence of purity. That most disputed statement of Aristotle, tragedy causes purification, catharsis points in the same direction. Even the Holy Spirit's gift of fear, which St. Thomas assigns to temperantia, purifies the soul by causing it to experience through grace the innermost peril of man. Its fruit is that purity by dint of which the selfish and furtive search for spurious fulfillment is abandoned. Purity is the perfect unfolding of the whole nature, from which alone could have come the words, behold the handmaid of the Lord. And so, of course, referencing Mary, the mother of God, but in reading this and thinking of all the things we've been saying about purity, but then making a connection to sobriety and the holiness of Mary, or her docility, it gives me clarity, I think, on, again, why with this understanding of temperance, right, that it is liberating, because we are, like, as we are purified, right, we're free from these trappings of sin, or we're free from secularism. And you're right, it's not perfect. I mean, we're not going to be there yet, but it is that journey to heaven, right, that we are hopefully striving for that holiness. And I think there's something, and I probably just need more time to think on it, but there's something about focusing on that word sobriety. And certainly, we're thinking about language, but I think that's also maybe too, I can't find where it was, but in this section, it also referenced like how we purify our bodies through fasting, or through different acts of, what do you call that? Like, not restraint, but
self-denial.
Self-denial, thank you. Like, I find that sobriety can be found in that way. I mean, even if you think of the most basic form, an addict, right? Like when you deny yourself this vice, right? Like that's the act of seeking that sobriety. There's purification in that. There's clarity in that. There's health in that. And I just had never thought of temperance like that. I mean, unfortunately, I know that I'm guilty of thinking of temperance in the way that Joseph Pieper wrote about it in the beginning. Like, that's not temperance. People like talk about temperance like that, right? Like that, don't overindulge yourself, or don't be too passionate, or, that's how he started off this whole section, basically telling us, this is, again, that poverty of language. But now to make this connection to really what Pieper has said, or Aristotle, or Augustine, Aquinas, this connection to purity and sobriety, it's opened up, I think, a very I guess a clearer way of thinking about this virtue. And I'm not sure I have anything to add to that, only to say that I think there's a lot to unpack upon just meditating on that idea of sobriety in connection to temperance.
If I could add on that, I think the very good on the purity and sobriety, and that for Pieper, he wants to stress that the purity and also the sobriety then are not overly spiritualized. And he uses that term a couple times, that they should not be at the expense or aimed against the created order. And he makes a big distinction between the two types of world that are found in Scripture, the worldliness, but then the world, the created order, being good. And on 167 and on the top of 168, he talks about in the province of Temperance, it is man's attitude toward creation which is decided and most decisively, and the wrong premise upon which rests the overvaluation and erroneous value given to temperantia in general and chastity in particular amounts to this, namely the explicit or implied opinion that the sensual reality, so the world that we take in with our senses of the whole creation, and above all the non-spiritual element in man himself, is actually evil. And he takes a very strong tack that we don't fall into the Manichaeism, monotism, the monotonists, or he even mentions the Cathari, the Cathari of the Middle Ages, but in Manichaeism, this soul being trapped in this evil material world. And so it's not the overcoming of some baser instinct, but rather the right ordering of our desires. And I really liked then when he talked about humility, is that it's not this self-debasement, it's about this honesty towards who we are, and also this making sure that we have God as God and not something else as God. And so again, that right ordering that he speaks to, that he has a good bit to say about reason, and he separates that from enlightenment, non-embodied reason, and speaking of a right order of what it means to be human, to be both body and soul. And just one other thing here before I stop here. And he speaks about how that we can even misuse so many of things that we would think to be as that are temperance building. And so let's see, he says, not only do fasting, vigils, and sexual continence take on a very special importance from this basic approach, but they move necessarily into the center of attention for man's striving perfection. This evaluation, however, shares and indeed intensifies the errors of its origin. And despite outward similarity, it has little to do with the Christian evaluation of those things. And he goes on and says that it has more to do with those heresies than it has to do with Catholic dogma that proclaims the created reality is good in all its spheres and is not subject to the arbitrariness of human evaluation. Indeed, at this basis, the point of departure of all evaluation as well, of all realization of value. And I really struck that, I mean, with these with the virtues, and especially how that he wants to make sure that we don't get hung up too much on any one of these sub issues of temperance. And again, that as the slides and Joanne made clear when she was talking at the beginning, that idea that this then temperance is how we're ordered inside to reality, the created order, like the baseline. He speaks of it as, I think he speaks of it as what the lake, the shore, and everything then else builds upon that.
Something that struck me was actually the sentence or two right before what you mentioned, Joanne, on page 205. But what does this unrestricted concept of purity stand for? It stands for that crystal clear, morning fresh freedom from self-consciousness, for that selfless acceptance of the world which man experiences when the shock of a profound sorrow carries him to the brink of existence, or when he is touched by the shadow of death. That thought encapsulated something like a phrase for me that was striking me as I read Pieper. I can't remember where I read it or where I found it, but it was discipline leads to delight. And I think that there is something a little bit deeper that needs to be added to that thought. It's disciplined dependence leads to delight. So there's this mix where we are committed to realizing we are not the center of the universe. We are committed to realizing that God is the center. We're free from self-consciousness to actually live as if we were created, as we were created to live. And then the verse kind of connected with that was continually coming to my remembrance was Psalm 16:11. For you show me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy, and at your right hand are pleasures forevermore. That inherently means it's nowhere else. So it's that disciplined dependence on the Spirit in the process of sanctification that leads us to find that in God's presence there is fullness of joy forever. And that hits just such at the pulse of the gospel that our culture is preaching. It is so delight oriented. And that is, in a sense, that should be celebrated, but there's death that comes before delight. There's disciplined dependence that must come before delight. And I think that people really helped me kind of solidify that thought.
If I may connect what you said, Nathan and Andy and Joanne, you know, the Virgin Mary, the mother of God, right? She lived in an era that she would have been stoned to death, committing adultery, right? Being pregnant. And yet she aligned her will. And I love that you said this, Joanne, because I never kind of pieced it together with Piper's book in that way. She aligned her will with God's will and said, I am the handmaiden of God. And so she did it the right size in the presence of God. Like Andy said, you know, we don't do these things to do these things. You know, we are not the Pharisee, that we are doing it for outward reasons, right? We're the one in repentance. And so the mother of God shows this, and her will aligns with God's will, regardless of, like what you said, Nathan, the death that is looming. Regardless of the death that's looming, she said yes. And so, you know, then of course that propels me to St. Paul, who says, I die daily, right? And and every day I die because I live in Christ and I become what each person needs because of Christ. So him, again, aligning himself with the will of God, release him. So the more basically we bind ourselves to the Lord in this temperance, the freer we get, even though it's kind of an oxymoron in the societal historical world, because we think of rules as things that hold us back, but in actuality, Christ turns that upside down and says, no, this is what's going to set you free. Oh, beautiful. That was beautiful, you guys.
I wonder how we can change the language to help convince others that the reverse is true, like you're saying. You know, we know that, we all know that, right? But it's so frustrating. We read the words liberating and we get what that means at the core, but that word has been so manipulated. And it's so frustrating, right? Like, how do we adjust that? I mean, we want to stick to the truth. So we want to stick to the real meaning of word, but then it gets lost. And it's hard to convince anyone of the actual truth.
Did you guys think it was interesting on, like, at the very end, and I think this relates, Monica, to what you're saying too, at the very end, he says that a temperance essentially is, you cannot hide it. Like, it will shine out of you. I put, as soon as I read that paragraph, I put really beside it, because I'm like, seriously, it's just gonna shine. So, but then I kept reading, I was like, oh, that's really awesome. And actually, I think in a way, one hope that I have for this insane society that I'm living in is that really the true, the good, the beautiful, prudence, justice, the virtues living inside of us are going to shine out beautifully. And that without words, hopefully, I mean, dear Lord, you know, without words, this we will be able to win the winnable, or to, you know, to shine to those people. And I thought that was one of the most beautiful things I read. I thought that was great. I really liked this book. But one of the most beautiful things I read was that that internal order has to burst out. It has to shine. Like you cannot stop it. If you're ordered, you're shining. And I thought that was really that was, the word I'm going to use is nice, because I have a huge vocabulary. I thought that was really nice.
Annis, your words about that shining, and like we just can't help that it will shine. It reminded me of the Gerard Manley Hopkins poem, God's Grandeur, which at the very beginning, it says, the world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out like shining from shook foil. And it's just beautiful and inspiring and exciting that that we get to be a part of that. But also, like, the rest of the poem talks about how the world is crushed and smeared, but nevertheless, like, God's grandeur shines forth, and that seems like that crushing, but nevertheless shining. And Ash and I have been reading, not together, but she put me onto this author, Mikato Fujimura, who's an artist, but he does this artwork, which he does a lot of thinking, but his artwork is a crushing of minerals and like to paint. And it's not just that old, like we all know about that, like Middle Ages kind of crushing of minerals, but it's a different kind of thing. But like there's this destruction which has to happen before the beautiful thing happens. And I don't know, my husband's reading some of his things too, and we were just talking about it on a walk a week or so ago, and it just drew our attention to so many things in nature which we all are aware of, but like where death has to happen before life. Obviously Christ's death and resurrection, but the seed and our own humility and sanctification. But yeah, it's Monica, I'm thinking you asked like how can we change the language so that it's appealing to others, but to some extent maybe just pointing to how that happens in other contexts makes it approachable to others. When we think about death, when I became a mother, I was still working full-time in a university setting, and I remember saying once, I meant it in a good way, but somebody was like repelled by it, that motherhood feels like a series of deaths. But I felt it in a purifying way, and they were like, "Ooh, how morbid!" But I just wonder if there's a way that we can communicate that that death to life because of other experiences that we all have with the way that life comes from, that discipline leads to freedom as death leads to life, or something like that.
I think you're right. And I think of how there's such a desire in our culture for natural things, natural foods, natural meditation, even if it's apart from religion, the type of athleticism and working out. There's a good article in First Things recently about like the discipline that comes through committed, like trendy workout fads, like CrossFit. I do CrossFit, and I've always noticed that connection, the spiritual connection, but many people go there and don't notice that connection, but in a way they're just not identifying it as such, right?
I think that's an important theme that Pieper uses in the book. That, it is not, and I think Andy lifted this up too, it is not the world is evil, our bodies are evil. No, everything is good. And we just need to align. We just need to, use a chiropractor, right, to get everything in order. And, chiropractor with a big C, God. And yes, pun intended, Christ. So, I think that's really important. But I do like what you said, Monica, about, and Joanne had this as one of the questions, which is the poverty of language, right? How do you explain that? And then, I think about what Anise said, right? You don't explain it. You live it. You are it, right? We have saints of the church, Seraphim of Sarov said, acquire a spirit of peace and thousands will be saved around you. You don't even have to use words, right? And so, yeah, the language is poor, and sometimes it gets in the way, but boy, actions are pretty loud words. They're pretty loud words.
So I wanted to share a passage that confuses me a little bit. Like, I'm not sure what it means, but because when I was reading it, it's at the bottom of page 159 to 160, and it lands on the connection between chastity and contemplation, because we are scolae and we are striving for restful learning, contemplative learning. It just hit me that Pieper was saying something here about like how we can, well, he says, be ready for contemplation. And again, because modern people living in a frenetic world, a busy world, a noisy world, contemplation, like you have to work at it to get there. And in the classroom, I'm also thinking with our students, we have to train. I mean, I have to quiet myself, right? Or quiet my mind. And we're doing that for our students, right? We're trying to limit the distractions in the classroom. So I'm not sure what to make of this. So if you don't mind, I think I will just read this small paragraph and then just say help. And maybe you guys can kind of share with me what you think he's saying here, because I feel like there's something there and I just want to get at it a little bit more. So the bottom of page 159, actually, maybe I'll start with that question. So in what way and why does unchastity destroy the structure of the person? Unchastity most effectively falsifies and corrupts the virtue of prudence. All that conflicts with the virtue of prudence stems, for the most part, from unchastity. Unchastity begets a blindness of spirit, which practically excludes all understanding of the goods of the spirit. Unchastity splits the power of decision. Conversely, the virtue of chastity, more than any other, makes man capable and ready for contemplation. It was that last part that I underlined and like put an exclamation point, and I was like, what? I was like, that's good, but I want to understand it.
So where is it breaking down? Where are you getting the part where it talks about how unchastity corrupts the prudence? Or was that unclear?
No, I wanted to read the full thing as it gets to contemplation, so that like we have like what it isn't, or what is destructive alongside what is good. But it's the connection to contemplation that I just, and maybe it was too late at night when I was reading it, but I just wanted to know more of how this virtue readies us for contemplation.
And I underlined that too. And I was thinking, when I think about it, I was thinking about also the relationship to prudence, because he says at the beginning that prudence is really seeing things as they really are, the ability to see what is real. And I have to think that there must be some connection there. And he uses the words blindness and things like that I know is coming around to it. Like, how does unchastity make you unable to see things as they really are? Is it selfishness coming in? Is it because you're no longer seeing humans as they really are? You're no longer seeing yourself as you really are? You no longer see God as he really is? Is this the whole wrap of things that chastity most pushes you toward? That's the only thing that I could think of.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm thinking of the word waiting. Like, being chaste has this idea of waiting for that which is most valuable and most holy, and pausing long enough to have a mindset of restraint that allows you to value that and pursue that and deny yourself when appropriate, to that end. And so I've been thinking a lot about our students, and I work primarily with, 15, 16, 17-year-old young adults, and they're very busy. Their lives are very full. And so when it comes to the discipline of math and the daily rigor of, did you do your homework well? Like, did you give yourself the space and the time? Did you provide enough weight in your life? Weight as in like pause, to do this well and to consider the concepts deeply. I'm seeing that as a relationship between both prudence and temperance, and chastity. And so when it comes to temperance,
yes,
I would have originally defined it as not prone to excess. But as I've read this, I'm thinking more about the idea of wholeness and the idea of like, you only have so much in a whole. And if your life is the whole, how much can you fit in that? Like, how many things can students do well? And when is it becoming excess? When is it exceeding the whole and becoming like a mixed number, if you will, like, it's beyond one. And so any time that we are prone to lack of temperance, we are not having rightly ordered affections. We're not seeing reality in its truest sense, and our sense of wholeness is out of balance. And so I don't know if that answers the question about chastity and waiting, but I see a connection of overfilled lives and not enough space to wait. And how is it? Dr. Perrin says it. Time and space to study the things that matter most, right? It's basically the idea of School A.
I loved your definition of temperance, because at the beginning, of course, Pieper says, temperance, and I go back to Joanne's second question, poverty of language. Temperance is not quite the word. It's a lot more than that. And that's why I believe he breaks it out the way he does. But when we look at the Greek, as he mentions at the very beginning, sophrosini, and we look at the etymology of that word, sophrosini is translated, quote unquote, right? Soundness of mind, prudence, temperance, chastity, etc. But if you splice it even more, sophron means a moderate, sane, right? A balanced look and view of things, having things in order. And then the sos meaning, being safe in that, whole, sound. So I love when you were talking about how you would use temperance and what you think it means. It's exactly that. All these words mean temperance, a part of temperance, which is sophrosini. So I just love that. I agree wholeheartily with what you said, that we have to have that sophrosini. And the early fathers of the church talked about the nous, the mind, but not the mind here, the mind of the heart. And that's where that sophrosini is gonna, like Anise says, swell up and cannot be contained.
I have so many things swimming in my head right now. This is great. Anise, I like what you were getting at with like, is it rightly seeing myself? Is it rightly seeing the other? And then Allison, when you mentioned waiting and space, my head went and started viewing all of these things spatially. So prudence is like out there. We're seeing the thing out there, God, creation, everything in right order. Temperance, you're seeing yourself in order. And then maybe contemplation is both of those things and seeing the space between us in order. And that I think Presbyteria, it draws my head back to what you were saying about being of a sound mind. Like you are able to pay attention to everything, both yourself, God's rightly ordered world, and himself, and everything in between. Yeah, I got a really funny mental picture right now. I'm not going to draw it for you, but thank you. This has been really helpful.
I like what you just said, Nathan, because I think maybe you just said in a simple way that I can understand what I think people are saying here about unchastity. A little bit further down the page on 160, he says, unchastity destroys in a very special manner this self-possession and this human keeping of oneself in oneself. So when you kind of did that diagram, if you will, of prudence and man and like where God is and or the order, right? I mean, the order of cosmos and then the order of man inside. That's what I think. Yeah. So if unchastity destroys that consequence of sin, and then the opposite being chastity, I mean, I have to think on it more, but yeah, I'm finding the language to understand what he means when he's saying this readies us for contemplation.
What about if we use the word faithfulness?
For what part?
For chastity, right? Chastity. I don't know who mentioned this. Something about someone mentioned, maybe it was Ash, about being married to the same person, the promise that you make, right? It's someone mentioned something like that. That's a type of chastity, right? You promise to be faithful, diligent to that one person. So what if we, took Allison's example and said, okay, so maybe another word that could say temperance is faithfulness. And if we're faithful, if we can sit in the presence of God and knowing our right size in his presence as creation, as like I like to say, Vincent, a squirrel in a tree enjoying life because God created it all. I don't know. Maybe that sense of chastity that then will it clears the picture for us, like what Nathan said. I don't know.
On the other hand, I'm thinking about it as order and disorder. Like maybe the reason chastity is such a problem is it is disordered. It's a passion. It happens to you instead of you being ordered and determining what you're going to do. And it's a very strong passion. And so maybe that's why it so gets in the way. It's out of order.
Anise, Dr. Christie just wrote in the text box exactly what you just said, which is kind of cool. Talk about the spirit moving. Dr. Christie wrote, perhaps since an unchaste person is driven by lust, they have an unquenchable appetite that can distract them from seeking contemplation and the life of virtue, right? Thinking of themselves instead of the other. So you guys said the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I can't pick the page out right now, but it just stood out to me when people was getting into the contrast of which was the worst sin, or I think that was kind of the gist of it. I was like, this is really interesting, when you really consider this and look at, and it's I think that it's not even the comparison of which is worse. He's really just looking at the various aspects of these sins, and that was something that really stood out to me especially.
Oh, I just read something that kind of gives me a little bit more context for the contemplation. And again, looking at how the person is not ready for contemplation. So on page 161, it's the first paragraph, the middle of it. It says, he writes, in an unchaste heart, attention is not merely fixed upon a certain track, but the window of the soul has lost its transparency, that is, its capacity for perceiving existence, as if a selfish interest had covered it, as it were, with a film of dust. So again, like when we think, kind of like what we were saying, we have to quiet the distractions for contemplation. And here what's being described is certainly a lack of clarity. We're not able to see clearly. I mean, a film of dust, there's no transparency. We're not able to perceive rightly, which I think also then, I mean, that's prudence, right? Or lack of prudence when we can't perceive rightly because we don't see reality. Again, I would have never thought of that in terms of like with temperance and sobriety or chastity being a virtue that enables us to be ready to contemplate. I mean, I just would have never made these connections, and I didn't make it when I read it through the first time. It's only because we're spending time talking about it and reading it and the Holy Spirit. But I just, when I came across that passage, that one I just read, it was helping me understand the effect that unchastity has on one's ability to perceive reality.
Yeah, in the same vein, if you turn to page 172 at the very top, I marked this. He says, but the world exists not only as God's creation, there is also the world, in quotations, which, as St. John the Apostle says, lies in evil and prevails in the gratification of corrupt nature, gratification of the eyes, and the empty pump of living. So, you know, if we're in that world, well, how could we contemplate? Because contemplation is supposed to be of God, what is good, what is beautiful in the world. And, you know, how do we show that to our students then, right? How do we then teach them to pitch their tent? I love using that. So you've heard me say that before. You know, es que no sin how do we teach them to do that, right? And to quiet everything else and just pitch the tent at the Mount of Sinai. Oh.
Well, and Monica and I were talking earlier today about a particular book, but it's that next line after that passage you read, Presbytera, that makes me even think of, again, kind of part of our mission of our school with faith and culture is to not shy away from seeking truth, even if it leads us into difficult conversations or healthy debate. We don't want to shy away from that. But he writes, there is not only the reality of creation, but also the perversion of the order of creation. And that's the reality, right? So we want to, when appropriate, with our students at various stages of their development, right? Like we want to prepare our students for the world that they encounter or will encounter as disciples of Christ. And so I was just making that connection there. So I know we are over time. This always happens, and we could keep going, but I know for Melissa, it's probably what, almost 3 o'clock or 2:30 in the morning. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight and sharing your thoughts and reading with us and thinking through these things. And I know that the beauty of doing this is that we're going to consider this throughout the whole year. We're going to ask you for blogs, for posts. We want you to think on this, write on this, bring this into your classroom when appropriate, bring it into conversations with your parents as it comes to you. Pray about this, reflect on it as it comes to you, just in your own quiet time. And then, you know, as the Holy Spirit inspires you, bring it into your classroom and in your community and in your work. And so I just want to say thank you again for coming tonight. Are there any last minute thoughts or kind of reflections that anyone else would like to share? All right. Presbytera, would you like to close us in prayer?
Sure, absolutely. In the name of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Lord our God, we thank you today for the fellowship, for you were in our presence, where 2 and 3 are gathered, you are there, and for revealing to us further in our journey towards you and towards the kingdom. Thank you for these wonderful instructors, families, students, and please watch and protect over all of them. And as your mother, as the mother of God, your mother and our mother, may she intercede for us. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you for coming.